Congratulations, it's week 17 and you have made it to your fantasy championships. We're excited for you. Happy holidays. We hope to win our championships too, and that's why we're able to give you the very best advice we can. And to do that, I'm bringing in Sports Illustrated's senior fantasy analyst, Michael Fabiano. Fabs, it was a tough road to get here, a lot of variance, but we have a little bit of, I guess it's good news now. It looks like there'll be a little bit less variance going forward, and hopefully that will help you give us some even stronger start and sits this week. Let's start at the quarterback position. You're telling us to go back to a guy that did a few of us dirty last week. I hope you're right. I squeaked through with him in my QB position. I need him to give me a much better game this weekend.
Right, and that's Matthew Stafford. I mean, sometimes in fantasy football, you have to have a short memory and forget about what happened last week. The matchup's great this week. They got the Ravens. Did you see what Joe Burrow did? He threw for over 1,000 yards against this team last week. Their defensive backfield is an absolute mess. And we've got all three of his top wide receivers, of course, in play. Cooper Kupp, Odell Beckham Jr., Van Jefferson. The running game has been solid with Sony Michel. Tyler Higbee's back. He was on the COVID-19 list last week. So I'm firing up Matthew Stafford despite the stinker and the 3 picks he gave you last week. And then I like Jalen Hurts this week. Now, he has failed to score more than 17 fantasy points in 2 of his last 3 games. I get it. You know, the numbers have not been as good as they were earlier in the season. But I love the matchup against the football team. Why? Well, in part, they just absolutely gave it up to our guy, Dak Prescott, and our beloved Dallas Cowboys last week. How many points did the Cowboys score on this defense last week? 56? Yeah, that's a lot. I don't know if the Eagles are going to get to that point, but I do like Hurts to rebound this week in a game that still has some importance there for Philadelphia. Speaking of Dak Prescott, keep him in your lineup. And I like Russell Wilson, too. Call me crazy. I like the matchup, though, against the Lions.
100% agree on Russell Wilson. I'm going to be using him in some DFS stacks, much like I did Joe Burrow last week. So even though T. Higgins crushed me in one of my leagues, at least I got some cash out of Joe Burrow and T. Higgins. So that's my small consolation prize, I guess. Okay, sitting quarterbacks this week. You don't like A.J. Brown and Ryan Tannehill this week.
Well, no, I like A.J. Brown. I just don't like Ryan Tannehill. And you know what? I mean, we're in week 17. And so, folks, if you're starting Ryan Tannehill, it's probably a 2 QB league, or I don't know how the heck he got here, all right? I mean, he's coming off a big win against the 49ers, but, I mean, his numbers still leave a lot to be desired. He's failed to score more than 16.5 fantasy points in 6 of his last 7 games. And last week, even with A.J. Brown back, he was under 15 points. And the Dolphins' defense is playing very well right now. Just ask Ian Book. Boy, was that terrible. So Ryan Tannehill is a sit-em for me. And speaking of the Dolphins, I'm also sitting Tua Tagovailoa. He's kind of been mediocre at best in the stat sheets. I mean, he hasn't produced even an 18-point performance since week 7. And the Titans' defense, while overall they've been generous to quarterbacks, lately that has not been the case. So Tua, outside of a 2 QB league, needs to be on your bench. Same thing for Derek Carr and the poster child for sit-em quarterbacks, of course, Matt Ryan going up against the Bills.
Yeah, I was just checking out the Titans this morning. They've allowed an average of 12 points per game to their opponents across the past 3. So you're right. Titans defense is tightening up, so beware. Let's head over to the running back position. I see what you did there,
Piacenti.
Did you like that? I know. It's week 17. I'm getting a little punchy. What are you going to do? Let's head over to the running back position. We like Tampa Bay Buccaneer. Now, we've talked all season long, especially the last few weeks, about having insurance for guys that go on the COVID list. Well, a lot of those COVID list guys are coming back, but one person we know isn't coming back, Leonard Fournette.
Right, Ronald Jones he's a virtual must start this week against the Jets. I mean, last week you saw a near 45% touch share, scored 16.1 fantasy points. And now you've got a matchup against literally the worst run defense in the National Football League. They've given up 26 touchdowns and nearly 34 fantasy points per game to running backs. I mean, if I'm playing in a DFS tournament, I may even look at Keyshawn Vaughn at this point. The Jets are bad. Rojo is a very good play. And we're going to stick with another running back who, well, hasn't had a whole lot of value for the majority of the season like Rojo, but suddenly he's come on. And that's Devin Singletary. Like, don't look now, but he's had a really good hot streak, 14-plus fantasy points in 3 straight games. During that time, he's really dominated the backfield touches for the Bills. Matt Breida was a healthy scratch last week. Zach Moss was active, but he barely touched the football. The Falcons have allowed the 9th most fantasy points to running back since week 9. So Devin Singletary is a very solid RB2 or flex. I also like Javonte Williams and Darrell Williams, assuming Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a no-go this week against the Bengals.
Yeah, and it doesn't sound positive for Clyde Edwards-Helaire, so I like that Darrell Williams call. Also, he is available on a few waiver wires. If you're in a more shallow league, I would definitely make that pickup. All right, if we're going to sit somebody at running back, who's it going to be?
These are more of a, hey, beware these players, right? Like Antonio Gibson, I get it. You probably got to play him. And he scored a touchdown last week against our beloveds, but, I mean, he still didn't really do much. He played a season-low 22 offensive snaps. And listen, he's not 100%, right? He's dealing with that toe injury. This week, he's got the Eagles. Their defense has allowed the 3rd fewest fantasy points to running back since week 9. So Gibson is a risk. And I'm also going to sit Rex Burkhead, who is the hero of week 16. He came out of nowhere and went bananas against the LA Chargers. But I just feel like you're chasing the points, right? I mean, the Niners defense has been tough on running backs. In fact, they've allowed just one running back to score more than 8.8 fantasy points against them in their last 4 games. So I understand that Burkhead had a big game last week and David Johnson's on the COVID list, but I can't trust him. I just can't do it unless I'm desperate for a flex. I'd also be fading Deonta Foreman this week. And if you're in a standard league, Michael Carter would be a fade. In PPR, I'd continue to play him.
Yeah, Burkhead is a desperate grab. If you lost James Robinson or you lost Miles Sanders, hopefully you can find a better substitute. But if not, you know what? Anything can happen. Good luck. I might have to roll him out in the league. I'm not sure. I'm nervous. Hopefully not. All right. For wide receivers, you are buying in to Detroit.
Amon-Ra St. Brown has been awesome.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, he has scored 89.6 points in his last 4 games. 89.6. And he's 3rd in points behind Cooper Kupp and T. Higgins. I mean, like, he's been unbelievable. He's right up there. Justin Jefferson, he's on that level. And I like him this week. He should stay in lineups against the Seahawks. They've allowed 6 touchdowns and the 5th most fantasy points to slot receivers. So St. Brown should be in your starting lineup. And let's talk about Odell Beckham Jr., right? I mean, with the Browns, he was basically a sit-em every single week. But he's been much better with the Rams, right? He has scored double-digit fantasy points in 4 of his last 5 games. The matchup this week is really good against the Ravens. They gave it up to T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd. I am picking on Baltimore's defense, their pass defense in particular. So OBJ is a very solid start. I'm also starting Devontae Smith and Christian Kirk, who is now the #1 wide receiver in Arizona with Nuke Hopkins out.
Wow, Christian Kirk versus Dallas. Very brave, Fabiano. Very brave.
I think it could be a high-scoring game. So
it could be. I think it should be. I hope it is, actually. I think it could be a lot of fun. All right, this week you are sitting Scary Terry.
Right. And again, folks, I mean, you're in your championship. If you don't have better options, I totally understand. But, I mean, look at his numbers. I mean, he's failed to score more than 9.1 fantasy points in a game over his last 5 games, right? And the quarterback play has been awful, right? Whether it's been Taylor Heineke or Kyle Allen, it hasn't mattered. Washington's passing game has been brutal. And, oh, by the way, he gets to face Darius Slay this upcoming weekend. So have a happy new year there, Scary Terry. I would fade him if I had depth, and I certainly wouldn't play him in DFS. And then Hollywood Brown. Now, a lot of this depends on what happens to the quarterback position. Right now, we're unsure who the starter will be. It's going to be one of 3 guys. We just don't know who it's going to be, whether it's going to be Lamar, it's going to be Josh Johnson, is it going to be Tyler Huntley? We are not sure. And I still like Brown in PPR leagues, but in standard leagues, I mean, he's failed to post more than 55 yards in a game since week 10. And he hasn't scored a touchdown in 7 straight games, right? And he's got the Rams this week. They haven't allowed a receiver lined out wide to score a touchdown since week 9. So I'm really worried about Hollywood Brown's stat line this weekend against the Rams. A lot of that is going to have to do, of course, with who the quarterback is. So keep tabs on the status of Lamar Jackson in particular this week. I'm also going to fade Chase Claypool and Brandon Ayuk this week.
You know, that's an interesting point about the Ravens quarterback. I don't think Lamar's been practicing. Last I checked yesterday, he hadn't, but of course he could be back. But Tyler Huntley, since he was a COVID list guy, maybe he's back. And if so, maybe he's someone you want to have picked up off your waiver wire just in case you lose someone at the last minute. And I wouldn't mind Tyler Huntley. I like him more than Josh Johnson. So just an idea to throw out there. Now let's go over to our favorite position, The tight end. Okay.
Yeah,
It's the green light this week.
It's like a headache every single week.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly. But Dallas Goedert, you want to talk about headache? I mean, the Eagles absolutely crushed New York last week, and he had 4.8 points, right? I mean, that's not good. But I'd keep the faith. He's got a really good matchup this week against the football team. Their defense has allowed at least 14.7 fantasy points to a tight end in 3 of their last 4 games, including Goddard scoring 20.5 against them in Week 15. So keep the faith in Dallas Goedert. And keep the faith in Rob Gronkowski. I really liked him last week. He was terrible. I mean, this is a 2-game stinker streak for Rob Gronkowski. In his last 2 games, 8.2 fantasy points. Not averaging, combined. That is not good. But he's got the Jets this week, okay? And the Jets defense, not all that great. And remember, Gronkowski has a history against them. In games against the men in green, Gronkowski in his career has averaged right around 14 fantasy points per. I'm also going to play Dawson Knox this week, even though the Bills have all of their wide receivers coming back. I still like him as a low-end tight end 1 in that matchup against Atlanta. And then don't look now, but Gerald Everett's been really good, and he's got the Lions this week, and he could be on the waiver wire if you need help at the tight end position.
Yeah, I don't know how Gerald Everett became such a favorite target of Russ, and DK got on the naughty list, but that seems to be what has happened. So Gerald Everett definitely available on a lot of waiver wires and a really good pickup. All right, sitting at the position this week, you don't like Mike Gesicki or Evan Engram.
Once again, don't get cute, okay? If somebody comes out and says, oh, you told me to sit Mike Gesicki and I played John Bates instead, well, you know, that evil's on you, okay? But Gesicki has not been great. I mean, listen, he's very inconsistent in the stat sheets. And look at the Titans. Their defense has allowed 3 touchdowns and the 5th fewest fantasy points to enemy tight ends this year, all right? That includes holding George Kittle to 4.1 points last week and Hunter Henry to 3.6 points back in Week 12. So if you got to play Gesicki, I get it, temper expectations. And then Evan Engram, I didn't like him last week. He got into the end zone. But Evan Engram will absolutely just destroy your fantasy championship hopes and dreams if you chase the points. All right, he has still failed to score more than 7.3 fantasy points in 4 of his last 6. So he's not been a very reliable option. He's also had more than 38 yards once in his last 8 games. That's not good. And the Bears have allowed an average of fewer than 38 yards per game to tight ends and the 8th fewest fantasy points to the position. So I'm fading Evan Engram. And the Giants are going like quarterback by committee this week with Jake Fromm and Mike Glennon, and neither one is really any good, folks. I'm also going to fade Jared Cook and James O'Shaughnessy.
Oh, the Giants. Well, yes.
How about
Sorry,
that? A
Giants
quarterback
fans.
by committee with Glennon and Fromm. Everyone in the quarterback universe, take a deep breath.
Darnold? Cam and Darnold, Glennon and Fromm. Which one would you rather have?
Here you do. You know what I get from this, Jen?
Yeah.
You start the defenses this week. That's what you do. You start the Bears and you start the Saints.
And I gotta say, your Miami defense recommendation, absolute fire last week. And if you want all of Fab's recommendations for every position, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, defense, and kicker, be sure you check them out at sifantasy.com. Better yet, hit subscribe right now and get all of our videos from Sports Illustrated. Look, this is the last week. You're gonna go all the way. You're gonna bring home this fantasy championship, and then we're gonna start working for next year. We're gonna keep the content coming because this is a year-round game if you wanna be a winner. So hit that subscribe button and good luck.